Hi. If you'd like to turn your biggest obstacles into successes, align your actions with your values and aspirations, and find peace of mind and balance in your life, then you're in the right place. I'm Chris Maragkakis, life and mindset coach, and I'd like to welcome you to my podcast, Mindful Mutterings. Let's get started. Hi, thanks for joining me. So this week's episode is all about me. I'm often asked why I became a life coach, how I became a life coach. And so I thought I would explain a little bit about my journey. So, I mean, as a child, I can remember being really, really anxious. I can remember, especially, we watched this film at school called, I think it's called The Morning After or something. It's about a nuclear holocaust and like how we were all going to die and what would happen if that was ever to happen, how we had to hide under the tables and stuff. And that's probably not an accurate recollection of the film. But what I do vividly remember was that I was suddenly very aware of death. And that caused me great anxiety. And I can remember going to sleep most nights thinking, if the siren went off, who would I want to be with me when I died? And it wasn't my death I was scared of, it was everybody else's death, of being left alone. And that got quite a hold on me over my life. I say I had because I've come out the other side of it now, but I had such a fear of people dying. And I was just very anxious, the idea that everything that I knew could be taken away because someone wanted to push a button. And so that kind of manifested in different areas of my life. And then I don't remember how old I was, but my dad's best friend died, and we went to the funeral, first funeral I'd ever been to, and I found that a harrowing experience, just so sad and so much emotion. And I do pick up on people's emotions, so I found it probably worse than most. And yeah, so now with hindsight I can see how the belief formed, but at the time I just had this awful anxiety all the time that I was going to lose the people that mattered to me, and that made my life quite hard, because as those of you that struggle with anxiety will know, when you have to live with it, it controls your life. So that was, I mean, despite having anxiety, I still had a happy life. I was loved, and I had the most amazing mum who just instilled so much self-worth and self-value. So I'm very grateful. But I did struggle with anxiety for a lot. And so then I went through school, and I had all the normal stuff that everyone has at school, and my dad was a teacher there, so that made life a little bit awkward. Although he rarely taught us. I think that was one of the stipulations of us being there, that we didn't have him as a teacher, but you can't control when cover's needed. And so that was always, I was always kind of singled out of having my dad as a teacher. Really handy on the days that the school trips are announced, not so good other times, especially when you get caught out of school smoking. Oh Christ, that did not go down well. But yeah, so, happy childhood, left school, went into banking because that was what you did and it was a good job. And I soon worked out that actually wasn't for me. I like numbers, but I didn't want to be in banking for the rest of my life. And so I started working at, quite a big jump. I started working at a psychiatric unit. I worked at Severals Hospital. And although it was still finance-based to start off with, that quickly evolved. And I just loved it. I loved all the interesting people that I was meeting. I loved the things that could be done to help people change the way that they thought and they acted. And so that's where my interest in psychology came from. And from there, I got married. And I got married quite young. I was 18 when I got married, and I'd already left home by then. And I was married to the lead singer of a band, and it was all very exciting and all very rock and roll. And then at 21, he decided I was too old and he went off with someone else. And so that's quite a lot to handle at 21. But because I did have such supportive family and friends, and my parents were amazing, and my mum had instilled in me this amazing sense of self-worth, I found the anxiety came back a little bit, because all of a sudden I had to rebuild my life, and it wasn't what I was expecting. And I found myself in this new place that I'd moved to in the middle of nowhere. But that was actually quite liberating. That actually turned out to be one of the best things that happened to me, because as I was sitting and I decided I would take control of this situation. I'm not one for sitting and letting life happen to me, and I never have been. So I took control of the situation, and I filed for divorce. And every time I went to the solicitors and told her what my life had been like, I remember sitting there thinking, I'm not having this again. I'm not ever being in this situation again. And so I would do something to take back me. And so I think the first time I had long hair, I think the first time I went and got my hair cut off, had this great little pixie cut, felt like a different person. I think the next time I got some piercings, and the final time when I got my decree absolute, I got a tattoo and I had a kick-ass party. I had the best divorce party that probably anyone's had. In fact, I can't remember an awful lot of it. I can just remember one of my friends put me to bed going, "It'll be all right, Chris, you'll be all right." Um, and so that was the start of working out who I was, because everything that I'd known up till then had all been kind of mapped out. You know, you get a good education, you leave home, you get a job, you get married, and then all of a sudden here I was at 21 and been there, done that, and now it was, what was I going to do for the rest of my life? And so I spent time just kind of looking at what I wanted from life, quite a lot of self-reflection. Who did I want to be? I didn't want to work in banking anymore. And so I started looking at what options were available, and I ended up working in residential schools for children with challenging behaviour. And I worked with boys, and I worked in a girls' school as well. And that also just, it kind of like sped up, if you like, my interest in how psychology and how mindset really impacts on behaviour and well-being. A few years on, that's all going very well, get myself more qualified, working in a girls' school, loving it, and I met my now husband, and this is like 32 years ago. We've been married 32 years, or 31 years. We've been together 33. I better just get that right. And so we got married, and that was amazing. And we had our first child, and she was really, really poorly. She was, I had trouble with it almost since I was, as soon as I got pregnant. Nothing went to plan. There was lots of problems with the pregnancy. I mean, I'm 4'11". I'm not really built for babies. And so all the anxiety comes back again, like, how am I going to get this baby out into the world? How am I going to look after this baby once it gets here? Because, I'm not doing a very good job of it at the moment. And it was really quite serious. I wasn't allowed to go into labour with her. I had to sit for most of my pregnancy because the placenta was failing and she wasn't doing very well. And there was all this like stress and everything around it. And I remember thinking there has to be a different way. Like, women just give birth to babies all the time. Why am I finding it so difficult? Anyway, we finally get to the day where we have an elected cesarean, and out she comes, beautiful, absolutely beautiful, tiny little thing, whisked off to special care. And the next time I see her, she's all bubble wrapped, and she's got a hat on, and she's got tubes everywhere, and I can just see these amazing eyes. And she just kind of looked at me and went, "Yep, you're mine. I've got you." And that was it, really. We were off and running. But she was quite poorly. She was really quite poorly. I'd had steroids to bring her lungs on, and she's just got one chest infection after another, and we were constantly back at the hospital because she had such a high temperature. This was after we'd actually got her home, and it was just constant worrying, like the fear of, obviously my fear of death got kicked back in again because I didn't know how to look after this tiny little prem baby, and also just because she was so poorly with it. And they kept talking about the fact she might have cystic fibrosis, or she might have this and that, and I just thought, you know what, actually no, I don't think she has. I really strongly felt that that was not what was wrong with her. And so I started looking at alternative solutions, because I didn't like that she was constantly being pumped full of antibiotics, and while medicine's a fantastic thing and I'm so grateful for all the help we had, I didn't want that to be the rest of her life. So I came across feng shui and energy therapies, and we feng shuied our house, and without a word of a lie, she was so much better. I mean, she must have been about 3 by now, and yeah, almost overnight her health improved. She was different. It was just amazing. So like, it was a real, God, there's something to this is incredible. And that then led me on my journey into holistic therapies, and as the universe would have it, as soon as you become interested in stuff, other stuff opens up to you. And before I knew it, I'd got all my qualifications and I was practicing. And I loved that. That was fantastic. The idea that you could make people, I firstly help people get well, but also you could give people the opportunity to heal themselves. You could give them the power and the responsibility to make themselves well. I just absolutely loved. And the more I got involved with holistic therapies, the more interesting people I met, and that kind of led me on to Buddhism in a little way, and mindfulness and meditation. And while I'm not Buddhist, I wouldn't say I was Buddhist. I do love the Buddhist principles, and I have been very lucky to see the Dalai Lama speak 3 times. But I wouldn't say I'm not really associated with any belief system as such. But what I really liked about Buddhism, and what I really liked about mindfulness as well, was that you had to take complete responsibility for who you were. Your karma was your responsibility. How you showed up in the world was your responsibility, and the only person that could change anything was you. And I think, for me, I've just felt that the Buddha was the greatest psychologist ever to have walked the planet, to tell people, to show people that if you can control your mind, you can control your life, that you don't have to live the way that you're living if you don't want to, and that because you have free will, actually all the things that you've done in your life are your choice. You might not understand the choices that you made, but you have to take responsibility for them, was a game changer for me, because all of a sudden it was like, right, well, I don't have to believe what I believe anymore. I don't have to have these fears. I don't have to be controlled by what other people think I should be like or how I should behave. And it was an absolute epiphany for me. And so I got more involved in mindfulness, and I learned to meditate, and ultimately learned to teach meditation. I became a master practitioner in mindfulness. I did attend a Sangha for a while with Buddhism. And I just learned as much as I possibly could. And I could really start putting this into practice in my life, and I could see the changes. And it was so fast, especially when you start with small manageable changes that you can do, every day. And I could see how my life was changing. I could see how I was changing, and other people could see how I was changing. And I'd learned how to manage my anxiety, because firstly I developed some really good coping skills. I learned that I had to move quite quickly. Once I started to feel that I was getting a bit flustered and I could feel the anxiety coming on, the first thing I had to do was move and get up and do something different so I could take control of my thoughts. And I learned that being outside was really important for me. And I started to learn through mindfulness all these things, how I learned how my thoughts were formed. I learned why I was telling myself things that I was telling myself, how that was impacting on my behavior. I learned that my emotions were signposts to my thinking that wasn't working. And I just felt so empowered, and I had all this information and all this knowledge, and it was showing up in my life, and life was just so much better. And all my clients, my holistic therapy clients, were seeing the change too, and they wanted to spend more time talking. And so the natural evolution then was to train as a life coach and start that part of my journey, which is what I did. And at the same time, I was also working in a school. And so I was doing my life coaching training alongside that, and I was working with special educational needs. And we had a cohort come in that year that was very high on autists and on neurodivergent and ADHD. And I designed a mindfulness program for them to help them. We had a sensory room. They were using the sensory room a lot because it was overwhelming for them. And I devised a 10-week mindfulness program and literally gave them control, showed them how to take control of what they were feeling, of how they were responding. And by the end of the program, only one was still using the sensory room. And that was just like, wow, this stuff is amazing. It doesn't just work for me, it works for everyone else. And so that's why my form of life coaching is all based on empowering people, on giving the people I'm working with the skills that they need to take control of their minds, so that they can challenge their thoughts. They can identify the ones that aren't working for them, and then they can choose how they're going to change them. And so that's how I kind of ended up doing what I'm doing now. And then I was still working at the school, and I was building up my practice, the life coaching practice alongside. And I'd always said I was going to go to Glastonbury for my 50th. And I got Glastonbury tickets, which is, for those of you that have tried and failed, you will know how incredibly difficult it is. But the school wasn't overly happy, because obviously you can't have time off during term time in a school. So I had to leave. And I wasn't really sure what to do, because I hadn't got my practice at a point where I was, okay to leave and not have the security of another contract. And as the universe does, this random contract came up to my attention, and it was working for HMP, working with offenders in the community. And so I ended up coaching female offenders in the community for 4 years. And that was just the most incredible experience, and so diverse. And I worked with so many women, and I came across so many complex issues, that my coaching got like kind of jump started or kick started into such an amazing pace so quickly that it was just incredible. In my my contract work, I could be working with someone who had just finished a life sentence and was struggling to reintegrate into society. And in my private practice, I could be working with someone who was advising government on policy. And what I noticed, what I came to realise with women especially, is that no matter where we are in life or how we're living our life, we all face the same few barriers. And I managed to narrow it down to 5. And I worked out that actually the biggest handicap for women to thrive are all the roles that we're assigned or we take on, which means that we've never got enough time. So time is our second one. So we're constantly feeling guilty, and guilt is the third one, because we can't spend the time with the people that we want to, or we're not doing what we think we should be doing, or we're, wishing we were one place when we're somewhere else. And that guilt causes us to compare ourselves to others and judge ourselves against what we're seeing other people do. And quite often we find ourselves lacking. And that is number 4. And that creates overwhelm, which is number 5. And that to me just seemed like such a logical path of progression, that is what my coaching is based around, how you deal with those 5 things. And it just seems to work. I've worked with, like I say, so many women, and when you tackle all of the areas of life, and you make sure that there's balance in each one, and you're giving people the power to manage their thoughts and change their behaviours and have the confidence to say no and set effective boundaries and take control for their life and open themselves up to possibility and adventure and love and compassion, everything changes. And that's why I love what I do. I love watching these people go on these amazing journeys where they become the person they want to be. They live the life they want to be, because they now know that the power that they have over controlling their life, and it all comes down to what goes on in their head. And to be a little tiny part of that is an amazing thing. So that's pretty much me. That's how I ended up coaching. That is my journey from whistle stop tour, from childhood to 55 years old. And I can honestly say I feel like I am doing what I was meant to be doing. And I know Jay Shetty said that if you find your purpose, which is what you know you should be doing with your life, and I believe I have, and you find your passion, which is the thing that you love to do and would do anywhere you go, which is the coaching for me. So that my purpose is helping people and my passion is the coaching. And then you found your dharma, which is the meaning of your life, the be all and end all, what you're destined to do. And so that's kind of where I feel I am. So anyway, I'm just going to ramble now, so I'm going to wind this up. So this is me. If any of that resonates with you and you feel that I'm the person to help you on your journey, then please get in touch. You can contact me via my website, simplybe.org.uk. You can email me on cm@simplybe.org.uk, or you can contact me on 07974 618 499. Thank you very much for listening to my Mindful Mutterings this week. I hope it's given you an insight into who I am, and I hope you'll join me for the next one. Take care. Bye.